lot of people out there who think that because a driver doesn't make it to the peak of Formula 1, they're a terrible driver. Or if a driver never makes it to Formula 1 full stop, they're a terrible driver. It's a bit like this belief that so-and-so isn't a good footballer because they never played in the Premier League. It's a total non-argument, but it's just one of those things, really. Formula 1 is the pinnacle, and everything is just whatever. But I would say that if you have a long career in Formula 1 without winning a race, let alone a championship, you must be doing something right. Now, some drivers have won 1 or 2 or even a smattering of races, but otherwise had a long career. People like David Coulthard, Mark Webber, Giancarlo Fisichella, Jarno Trulli, Rubens Barrichello. The list continues. There's a few drivers named there that I've done a video like this on, and there's some that I've yet to do a video like this on. But this extends across the world as well. There are some phenomenal drivers out there who people will dismiss as being crap just because they didn't make it to the holy grail of competing in F1, because F1 is the pinnacle. The notable exceptions to this rule, if you want to call it that, are the likes of Sebastian Loeb, Colin McRae and AJ Foyt. But Shane van Gisbergen, Kalle Rovanperä, Kyle Larson and insert person I missed here will forever be who? Because, as mentioned, they haven't raced in Formula 1. And some drivers might just find their calling elsewhere. Some drivers take to sports cars more than they do open wheelers. Derek Bell, Tom Christensen, people like that. Some are more suited to touring cars like Jason Plato. Some more suited to stock cars. Or, if you're Shane van Gisbergen, you could hop into anything and be competitive straight away. And one driver who didn't necessarily hit the big time in Formula 1 but has still gone on to win the biggest prize in IndyCar twice since leaving Formula 1 is Takuma Sato. I hinted at doing this video the other day because I was watching the Indy 500, or at least waiting for the Indy 500 to start because of the rain delay, and saw that Sato was on the grid, and I had some fond memories of him racing in Formula 1. I even wondered about putting a cheeky tenner on him to win the race, but then I saw it wouldn't return that much, so I didn't bother. Putting 20 quid on Andretti to win the race and break the curse was worth $2.5 grand, and I'm definitely glad I never put that on because he was in the wall on the first lap. But at least he got further than McLaughlin did. And actually, while we're on the subject, Scott McLaughlin is that good that he can crash his car on the formation lap and effectively not start the race, and still end up finishing the Indy 500 higher than 33rd. He overtook people without being in the race. You don't see Verstappen or Hamilton doing that, do you? But anyway, back to Takuma, or Taku to his friends. So Takuma was born in Tokyo in 1977, making him, at the time of writing, 48 years old. I know, where has the time gone? Kimi Raikkonen is going to be 46 this year, and I remember him coming into F1 as this fresh-faced 21-year-old. But there is one thing that Sato shares with a couple of drivers I've covered in this retrospective series, namely Damon Hill and Pedro Diniz. And that thing is that he started later than a lot of his contemporaries. Sato was 19 years old when he got started in karting. He'd been pretty handy on push bikes as a kid, but going into motorsport was the ultimate dream, having watched the Indy 500 and other motor races in Japan and being enamoured by the whole concept of racing cars. He bought his first kart in 1996 and ended up winning a competition to get a season of Formula 3 racing in Japan, paid for by Honda, and he did that in 1997. But Sato had visions bigger than Japan, and with Honda's backing he managed to get over to Europe even though he could barely speak a word of English, and started competing in British Formula 3 in the national class. Now back then the national class was for people who had older chassis who otherwise wouldn't be able to compete normally. At this point, this is usually where I say, back then British F3 was absolutely stacked with talent, here's some names you might recognise. But at this point, the only driver who achieved anything of note was a 19-year-old kid called Jensen, who finished third behind Luciano Berti and Mark Hines. Hines went on to race in the British Touring Car Championship and was also a test driver at BAR. But it looks like he found his career more in driver coaching and more motorsport business related stuff rather than actual driving. Up until 2021, he was Lewis Hamilton's business manager, apparently. And Sato did 7 races out of the 16 and finished in the top 3 in class at every one of those races, except for a retirement he had at Pembrey. Yeah, Pembrey. If you've never heard of it, it's in Wales. But in 2000 he was in the main class, the one where you have to really test yourself against other up-and-comers. And there are a few drivers here that you might recognise. Antonio Pizzoni made it to Formula 1. Thomas Scheckter is Jody's son, who has also had a career of his own. Narain Karthikeyan drove for Jordan. Gian Maria Bruni also had a brief F1 spell. And there's also World Touring Car Champion Andy Priaulx. But there was another person on the grid, someone who went on to become a quite tame racing driver, it has to be said. Now, some say that he finished 8th in the 2000 British Formula 3 Championship ahead of Andy Priaulx. And if he was going to claim that he was a better driver than Max Verstappen, he wouldn't dunk his car into third gear mid-corner and end up spearing himself into a wall. All we know is, he's called Ben Collins. Sato was 3rd in this championship, winning 4 races out of the 14 and finishing comfortably ahead of Karthikeyan. But as you can see, he was still a little off Scheckter and Pitsonia. And it would be useful if the Wikipedia page for this season had the point system so we could work out how he could have scored higher, but well, here we are. But the following year he won British Formula 3 and also won the prestigious F3 race in Macau. As part of the engine deal that Honda had with the Jordan Formula 1 team at that time, Sato was put in one of the seats at Jordan, which means that he'd gone from his first ever karting race to Formula 1 in just 6 years. But that 2002 season was supposed to be a turnaround season for Jordan. Eddie still had the Benson and Hedges logos, but the size of those logos had been overtaken by even bigger ones for DHL, because DHL was now the title sponsor of the team. And it was a deal worth about £20 million, which should have seen Jordan be able to develop the car better than they otherwise would have done. But the car wasn't as good as they hoped, and those DHL logos would be gone at the end of the season, as the 3-year deal that was supposed to be there was only done for just 1 season. At his debut race in Australia, he lost the electrics late on, but bounced back with 2 consecutive 9th place finishes in Malaysia and also in Brazil. At San Marino, the gearbox died on him and he spun off at the Spanish Grand Prix. But it's at the Austrian Grand Prix that he made headlines, but for all the wrong reasons. At least it wasn't his fault. Sato had pitted under the safety car and was about to be lapped by the front-running cars of Rubens Barrichello, Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya. Nick Heidfeld was supposed to be the next one coming through in about 5th or 6th place, but he was trying to navigate Alex Young's Minardi that was behind Sato. Young had a slight lock-up and Heidfeld had to take avoiding action. As he was on the brakes and trying to avoid the Minardi, he lost the rear and was now out of control. Heidfeld's car spun almost through 180 degrees and was heading backwards into the hairpin of turn 2, or turn 3 depending on how you look at it. The car was unable to slow down and he was skipping across the grass on the inside of the corner, where he barely missed Montoya's Williams that was up the inside of Sato's car and slammed into the side of the Jordan. The Sauber was lucky to crash into the side pod which took the brunt of the impact. This was also the 2002 season and drivers were not required to wear the hands device at this point. It was like Sato had been smashed into by a freight train with all the damage that was caused. Even though the Sauber had launched into the side pod, there had been damage to the cockpit which caused a concern. And if it had hit about, 18 inches further forward, it could have been a lot worse. Even though you could see Sato's legs in the hole that the Sauber had left in the side of the car, both drivers emerged relatively unhurt. Even luckier for Sato when you realise how the Jordan was designed that particular year. The nose cone on the 2002 Jordan was higher than most of the other cars on the grid, or probably the highest of the cars on the grid that year. So with the way that Takuma was sitting with the raised legs and everything else, it meant that the gearbox casing of Heidfeld's car went under his knees rather than through his knees. Sauber were using brand new brake pads for that race that took a while to heat up, and after the crash, they never used them again. Sato suffered 3 more retirements that year. At Monaco he crashed letting Fisichella through, at Silverstone his engine blew up, and in France he spun off. But he did manage to score points that year, managing to score 2 points with his off-the-pace Jordan at Suzuka, which in turn helped Jordan beat the effective Honda factory team BAR. Now speaking of, Sato would move to BAR for the 2003 season as a test driver. He did get an outing in Japan in 2003, taking the reins from Jacques Villeneuve and brought the car home in 6th place, which impressed BAR enough that they decided to keep him on for the following year as a full-time driver. And Sato was able to qualify 4 times in the top 3 during the course of the 2004 season, with BAR having a car that was the best of the rest with how good that Ferrari was that year. Button had managed to get a pole at Imola in that same car, and it was a car that Sato could use to show how quick he could be, even if his aggressive driving style wasn't making fans of everybody. But that aggressive driving style paid off at the 2004 US Grand Prix at Indianapolis. During that race, Sato hadn't pitted during a safety car period, meaning he lost time and places when he pitted under the green flag. After emerging from the pits, he slammed in fast lap after fast lap after fast lap, overtaking several cars on track and making his way into the top 3, finishing third and taking the first podium for a Japanese driver since Aguri Suzuki finished third for Lola at the 1990 Japanese Grand Prix. While he bore the brunt of the reliability issues on that car, whether because he pushed too hard or not is unknown, he still finished in the points 9 times out of the 11 times he finished, which was a mega return. And to date, it's still the best season for a Japanese driver in the history of Formula 1. 2005, on the other hand, was a disaster. BAR were disqualified from the San Marino Grand Prix as a result of the iffy fuel tanks they were running, and a video has already been done on that, and then they were banned for the next 2 races after the San Marino Grand Prix. On top of that, he missed the Malaysian Grand Prix due to illness, and then didn't race at Indianapolis because of the Michelin teams withdrawing over the tyre safety concerns. I probably should remake that video for the 20th anniversary. When was that race? Okay, 19th of June, I'll make a mental note of that. But after that season, Sato was released and wouldn't be at BAR for 2006, despite the team now being Honda. But there was going to be hope. The new Super Aguri team, which was headed up by Aguri Suzuki, the same man that I name-dropped a few moments ago. This would be the Honda B team, with Honda putting Sato in the car because of how popular he was in Japan. At the same time, he'd proven to be very professional and good with feedback, and would help the younger Japanese drivers coming through. Although the Japanese driver that Sato started with would lose his license after just 4 races. Sato scored a 10th place at the season-ending Brazilian Grand Prix, which is good for a single point today, but in those days, it was only the top 8 that scored. But there was going to be something coming for 2007, something that was going to benefit the Super Aguri team quite nicely. And that is, the 2007 Super Aguri car was basically the 2006 Honda, which was a race-winning car. Sato scored Super Aguri's first ever point at the Spanish Grand Prix, coming home in 8th. And it's not like a race from the 90s where we go, hey, the 40s finished 8th and 9th, but that's with an asterisk because they were running last of the on-track runners and 5 laps down. This was done on actual pace, with Sato being the first of the lapped cars behind Kovalainen's Renault and in front of Fisichella's Renault, Barrichello's Honda and the other Honda of Button. But it would be at Canada where Super Aguri would have its day of days, and Sato really made a name for himself. Because it was at Canada where Sato had decided that he wasn't quite content with just overtaking Raikkonen's Ferrari and Schumacher's Toyota, he also fancied a go at the then world champion in a far superior McLaren. Alonso had been suffering from handling issues after being squeezed across the grass on the opening lap, but Sato managed to overtake Fernando around the outside of the chicane and went on to finish a brilliant 6th, the best result of Super Aguri's brief F1 career. The car never bothered the top 10 again over the course of the 2007 season, the best result being 12th at the Brazilian Grand Prix. After just 4 or 5 races of the 2008 season, Super Aguri folded due to lack of funds, and with it came the end of Takuma's F1 career. After 2 years away, Sato reappeared in single-seaters over in the US, where he signed with KV Racing Technology for the 2010 IndyCar season. It wasn't much to write home about in that first season, but in the second season he improved as he found his footing, managing to get 3 top 5s and 2 poles, although he would still finish down in 13th place. The following year, he was able to step up the grid by signing for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, and fought for the win on the final lap of the Indy 500. He tried to overtake Franchitti up the inside of turn 1 on the final lap but ended up walling it, but he ended up earning respect from a lot of the IndyCar purists who admired the set of stones that he had to try and challenge Franchitti for the win. In 2013, he joined AJ Foyt's team, and in the 3rd race of that season at Long Beach, he took a very popular win, becoming the first Japanese driver to win an IndyCar race, as well as taking 6 top 5s, 2 podiums and 2 further pole positions. He would stay there for a few years, leaving at the end of 2016 and would join Andretti in 2017. 10 years after his duel with Alonso at Montreal, they shared the track again for the 500, and Sato won the race at the same track he took his first ever F1 podium. He'd go back to Rahal Letterman in 2018 where he'd score 3 more victories before taking a second Indy 500 victory in 2020. And coincidentally, Alonso was in the field for that Indy 500 as well. Maybe Alonso is Sato's good luck charm. But this year Takuma has only done the 500, he's not doing the full season, which is a little bit of a shame because I quite like him. To start racing at 19 and then make it to Formula 1 6 years later, and then achieve a podium in Formula 1 before going on to take 2 victories at one of the biggest events of the year, is incredible. By the time Sato got started in racing, his contemporaries would have had many years of experience behind them. And like I've said with the likes of Damon Hill, if he'd started younger, then there might have been time to hone the skills a little bit further, and maybe he might have been able to tune that aggression out a bit. Sato has the motto of no attack, no chance, and has earned him quite the following as a result. I guess it's the Japanese version of if in doubt, flat out. But that said, his aggressive style in Formula 1 didn't make him as crash happy as you'd think. Out of the 31 listed retirements for him, with Stats F1 coming in clutch here, 10 are driver error related. And even then, we've not brought in which of those weren't his fault. One of them definitely isn't his fault, that being Austria 2002. And to think we remember that race more for what happened on the final lap between Rubens and the Michael. So while Sato wasn't exactly the most successful Formula 1 driver, not being a Schumacher, Hamilton, Clark, Senna or even a Verstappen, he still had a little something. That 2004 season was proof of that, as well as the 2007 season where he was pulling off things that shouldn't really be done in that Super Aguri. But despite leaving Formula 1 and going on into IndyCar, he's managed to attain this cult following on both sides of the Atlantic, and in turn that might have inspired the likes of Kamui Kobayashi, who also has a similarly aggressive style. His 2002 season wasn't helped by that smash and his Jordan being off the pace. 2004 he was given a decent car that he managed to use to score his only podium in Formula 1, but that all came undone in 2005. BAR was struggling, and then they got disqualified and banned for those 2 races for the dodgy fuel tank hack that they had, and that sent Sato back even further. And the resultant bad rest of the season saw him get that demotion to Super Aguri, where he then managed to pull off those 2 points paying finishes. So what would he have been able to achieve in a better car? We never got to find out really, did we? It's a shame that he wasn't around longer in F1. But with Honda withdrawing from F1 the year Super Aguri went bust, there might not have been anywhere else for him to go, other than the back of the grid teams that appeared in 2010. So with that said, IndyCar was probably the best place he could go, and he's been quite successful. But as always with these things, I just provide you with the stats and provide you with other little bits of information so you can figure out things for yourself and form your own opinions. And once you've got one of those opinions, do leave it down in the designated comment submission zone under this video. So then, a look at Takuma Sato, a driver who managed to gain himself a cult following on both sides of the Atlantic with his aggressive way of driving. If this has been a fun look through the motorsport history books, then do by all means give this video a like so I know I've done a good job, and for more stuff like this from the channel, get subscribed and also get the bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the rad lads over at Patreon who continue to support me at a more personal level, and if you want to help keep the lights on around here or otherwise contribute to the picture purchasing piggy bank, a link to Patreon will be in the description along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks for one and done donations and memberships for Patreon but without going through Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.